There's a specific sound the dagger of time makes when you rewind. This rushing, granular hiss like sand flowing through an hourglass. The moment I heard it again after roughly 20 years, something unlocked in me that I wasn't expecting. I was maybe 7 or 8 years old the first time I played Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. I remember the orange glow of the palace walls, the prince running through corridors that felt impossibly large, and the sense that I was part of a greater story. But I know almost nothing about what the game was because I wasn't even speaking English at that time. So I went back, not to confirm that Sands of Time is a masterpiece, but to find out whether it actually is one, or whether nostalgia did its magic to hide all the rough edges. And spoiler, it definitely did. But what I didn't expect to find was that the game itself is about the exact thing I was doing by going back to it. And that realization changed everything. Let me start with what still works, because there's a lot of it, and I think it deserves to be said clearly before anything else. The movement in this game is still genuinely beautiful. The prince runs, jumps, wall runs, swings, rolls, and climbs through environments that feel designed like puzzles you solve with your moves. And there's a rhythm to it that I don't think I could have articulated as a kid, but that I felt immediately by coming back. It simply flows. That's the only way to put it. When you execute a clean sequence, wall run, ledge jump into landing, it feels like you did something. There's a weight to the prince's movements without it feeling sluggish. You hit the wall run and the animation is snappy, responsive. The game gives you clear visual language for what's climbable and what isn't. Yellow curtains, wooden beams, cracked walls. You see them and you know how to approach them. Part of why it works so well is the rewind mechanic, which I still think is one of the most uniquely brilliant design decisions in the history of action platformers. When you make a mistake, a mistimed jump, a fall you didn't see coming, you can pull back a few seconds and try again. It's limited by a sand meter, so it's not entirely a free pass, but it's enough. Enough to fix a bad input, enough to recover from something unexpected, enough that you can actually commit to difficult sections without the creeping dread that one slip will send you back to a checkpoint that was 30 minutes ago. Playing it as a kid, I just accepted this as a feature of the world, but playing it now, I can see exactly what it does to the experience. It makes the game feel like it's on your side, and that changes everything. You push further, you try more, stay in the flow for longer, and narratively it's elegant. The dagger of time isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it's the framing device for the entire story. The prince is literally rewinding time and retelling events as part of his story for Farah, which we'll discuss later. Because the other thing that holds up surprisingly well is Farah. She's the only other person you really spend time with across the whole game, and as a kid, I think I just understood her as the girl who helps sometime. But coming back now, I have a much clearer sense of what she's doing in the story. She's capable in ways that matter. She solves problems. She pushes back on the prince. She has a perspective that the game takes seriously. And yet she's paced carefully enough that she never crowds you. She appears, contributes something real, and then steps back. In a game where the world is literally falling apart, where your father has been turned into something monstrous and you're the one who caused it, her presence carries a kind of symbolic weight that I genuinely didn't have the framework to appreciate at 8 years old. She's what you're trying to get back to. She's the representation of the normal world, the proof that something is still worth saving. And the game earns that without ever making a big deal out of it. And I think that's a real craft. The relationship between the prince and Farah, that dynamic hits different now. It's not a romance story by any means, it's a trust story. She has every reason not to trust him. He unleashed the sands that destroyed her home and killed her people. But they need each other to survive. So as you play the game, you watch this gradual shift where mutual survival becomes mutual respect, and by the end, actual trust. So mechanically, it holds up. But that's only half the answer, because when you can see the seams in something you loved as a kid, the question stops being, is it good? And starts being something more complicated. Let me tell you about the camera. In the 2000s, we were used to fighting the camera. It was just part of the deal, and you accepted that certain angles would betray you, that the transitions between spaces could disorient you for a second, that sometimes the thing you needed to see would be just outside the frame. I accepted all of that as a kid without a second thought because I had no frame of reference for anything better. Playing it now though, with 20 years of games that have largely solved these problems, the camera in Sands of Time feels less like a tool and more like a main obstacle. In tight corridors, it locks up. Sometimes when fighting enemies, it would start spazzing out randomly. At certain angles, it starts rotating in a way that has nothing to do with where you're trying to go. As a kid, I would just rewind and try again without registering why it happened. But as an adult, I noticed every time. I want to be careful not to be unfair here because the camera isn't broken in a way that ruins the game. It's just an early version of a game mechanic that we have since improved on. The problem is that once you've learned the refined version, the original does feel slightly outdated. You know what the game is trying to do, but you can see the places where the technology wasn't quite there yet to do it cleanly. However, the combat is the bigger issue. On a surface level, it looks great. The prince moves with real style, he vaults over enemies, which, as an 8-year-old, I thought that was the coolest move I have ever seen. So it's clearly doing something impressive visually, but it plays poorly. The freedom you have during platforming disappears almost entirely in combat. Your movement gets constrained. By the midpoint of the game, it gets genuinely sluggish. And the gap between the platforming sections and the combat sections is wide enough to actually disrupt the flow the game works so hard to build. The execution mechanic, where you have to finish downed enemies with the dagger, or they come back to life, does add strategic depth by forcing you to choose who to finish and who to leave on the ground. But that layer of thought doesn't fix the fundamental problem, which is that the combat just feels bad in a way platforming never does. You will always be fighting 4 to 6 enemies, which will body block you, hit you during animations, or just straight up stun lock you with their attacks. This, combined with the camera janking out randomly as well, makes up for a very frustrating experience trying to finish the fights. The enemy variety is thin. You fight the same handful of enemy types with the same patterns over and over. And when you die, which you will, it's rarely because you made a tactical mistake. It's because the lock-on swapped targets mid-combo, or the camera clipped into a pillar, or an enemy attacked you off-screen during an animation. Every single death felt cheap. Here's the thing that hit me hardest on this replay though, and it took me a while to be able to name it. The game is about rewinding time to undo a mistake that never should have happened. The prince takes something he shouldn't have taken, releases something that should have stayed locked away, and spends the entire game trying to pull back time far enough to make it right. But the whole time, he's narrating, speaking in the past tense. The prince is telling this adventure to Farah. That framing device creates this interesting tension. You're playing through events that have already happened, filtered through the prince's retelling. Every time you die, for example, the prince backtracks.
That didn't happen.
Which means from the very first moment of the game, you understand that he survived it. He made it through. Whatever happens, you know there's a version of him on the other side looking back. It's a small thing, but it adds texture to what could have been a straightforward action game plot. None of that registered at 8 years old. I'm not a native English speaker, so I had no idea whatever they were saying. I only interacted with the game through what I saw or what my big cousin, who spoke some English, told me. As far as I was concerned, there was a girl, there was a dagger, I could go back in time, and there were sand zombies. But playing it now, in my late 20s, returning to something from my own past and trying to figure out what it actually is, the whole thing reads differently. There's something quietly melancholic about a game that is structurally built around the desire to undo a mistake, to go back, to fix it, to restore something you damaged before you truly understood what it was. The prince releases the sands of time because he wants to impress his father and claim glory. His arrogance creates the disaster. The entire game is him dealing with the fallout of that one impulsive decision. I came back to this game with nostalgia. The game itself is about the past and going back to try again. That's not a coincidence, and I don't think it's an accident. There's also something worth thinking about how my brain filled in the blanks the first time. I didn't see the low resolution textures, or the stiff camera, or the sluggish combat encounters. My imagination was doing significant work on top of what the game actually provided, and the result was something more vivid and more seamless than what was actually there. Coming back with adult eyes doesn't ruin that. If anything, it makes it more interesting because now I can see both versions at once. The game I remember and the game that actually exists are slightly different versions, with the gap between them being called nostalgia. So, does the jank ruin the magic? No, not even close. But it does clarify it. Sands of Time is not the game I remember. The game I remember was flawless in the way that things you experience before you develop critical judgments are flawless. Completely, uncritically, without any sense of what it cost to make it, or what it was asking you to accept. The game that actually exists is something more interesting. A genuinely ambitious, often beautiful, occasionally frustrating piece of design that got a remarkable number of things right at the time, when the right answers were still being figured out. The movement is still elegant. The rewind mechanic is still one of the smartest ideas in video game history. The storytelling has more craft in it than most of that era. And yes, the camera will betray you. The combat will wear you down, and there are moments where the cracks show in a way that are hard to unsee once you've seen them. But here's what I keep coming back to. That sound, the sand pulling backwards to the dagger. The moment I heard it again, something in me already knew the answer before I'd played a single second. Some games get their hooks into you early enough that they become part of how you understand what games can be, and no amount of replaying them with older eyes fully undoes that. Sands of Time earned its place in me a long time ago. Going back just helped me understand why.
Yeah.